There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words, when a single reflection carries the weight of centuries, and when truth breaks through the noise like light piercing through darkness. Joe Rogan, a man known for his raw conversations and unfiltered curiosity, found himself drawn into a subject that goes beyond science, philosophy, and even human culture. It was the concept of Allah, the ultimate reality that Muslims believe governs every atom of the universe. For years, Joe had spoken with thinkers, scientists, and spiritual leaders of all kinds. He wrestled with the mysteries of consciousness, the enigma of life after death, and the human longing for meaning in a chaotic world. But what captivated him most, and what he expressed in one of his most powerful reflections, was the idea of surrendering to a higher reality, not surrender in weakness, but surrender in the deepest form of trust, and in the language of Islam, that higher reality is Allah. Joe began by acknowledging the raw fact that human beings are fragile. We live on a rock spinning in the middle of endless space, clinging to a thin atmosphere, sustained by systems so complex we can barely comprehend them. Yet we walk around as if we're in control. He pointed out how strange it is that we think we own anything, our houses, our bodies, our very breath, when all of it can be taken away in an instant. He said that the concept of Allah shatters the illusion of control, reminding us that existence itself is a gift, not a guarantee. To him, this wasn't just an abstract idea. It was humbling. He compared it to standing at the edge of the ocean during a storm. You feel your smallness, your limits, but also something greater, a presence that commands respect and awe. That, he said, is the beginning of understanding what Muslims mean when they say Allahu Akbar, that Allah is greater, not just greater than you or me, but greater than everything we can imagine, every fear we hold, every power we think we understand. What struck Joe the most was how this realization changes the heart. He explained that in modern society, people are suffocating under the weight of anxiety, depression, and isolation because they've been taught to carry life on their own shoulders. They try to control everything, chase material success, and drown themselves in distractions. But deep down they're exhausted. The beauty of turning to Allah, he said, is that it allows you to put down the weight you were never meant to carry in the first place. It's not about giving up your mind or your freedom, but about aligning yourself with the source of life itself. Joe pointed out how this shift in perspective can transform the way you live every day. Suddenly, gratitude becomes your natural state, because you recognize that every breath is a blessing. Every sunrise is a gift. Every struggle is not random chaos, but part of a larger design. And when life hits you with hardship, instead of collapsing under it, you find strength in knowing that you are not alone, that the same power that created galaxies is the one guiding your path. He compared it to a fighter stepping into the ring. If you believe you're fighting alone, the fear can break you. But if you know the Creator of all strength is with you, then even in your weakest moment, you find courage. Joe emphasized that this is why so many Muslims find peace in prayer, in saying in Na lillahi wa in na ilayhi raji'un, that we belong to Allah and to Him we return. It's not just words, it's a perspective that changes everything. Joe's words carried weight because they weren't delivered like a preacher, but like a man who had seen enough of the world to know its limits. He admitted that humans are constantly searching, through science, psychedelics, success, and stories, for something that gives life meaning. But in Allah, there is not just meaning but clarity, because if Allah is real, and if He is the source of everything, then your existence is not random. You're not just stardust floating in space. You are chosen, created, and guided with purpose. He reflected on how powerful it is that millions of Muslims bow down in prayer every single day, not to worship themselves, not to worship wealth or fame, but to humble themselves before the one who gave them life. He said that act of surrender is the most profound form of strength, because it means you're not enslaved by your ego, your desires, or the chaos of the world. You're anchored in something eternal. Joe's message about Allah wasn't about labels or organized systems. It was about the undeniable reality that there must be something greater, and that when you recognize it, your heart changes. He urged listeners to sit with that thought, to really let it sink in, because when you do, the illusions of control, of fear, of endless chasing, they all fade away. What replaces them is peace, and this was only the beginning of his reflection, because what Joe discovered next went even deeper into how the recognition of Allah not only transforms the heart, but transforms how you see the entire world. When Joe Rogan spoke about the heart-changing reality of Allah, he didn't stop at the personal experience of surrender. He pushed further into the way this belief reshapes the very lens through which you see the world. To him, it wasn't just about personal peace. It was about unlocking a deeper truth that connects everything together. He described life as a puzzle where most people are only looking at scattered pieces. They see pain without purpose, beauty without explanation, and time slipping away without direction. But when you bring Allah into that picture, suddenly the scattered pieces begin to form a coherent design. The puzzle isn't random anymore, the suffering has lessons, the beauty has a source. The time you've been given isn't meaningless, it's a test, a journey, a preparation for something beyond this world. Joe found that idea incredibly powerful, because, as he explained, the modern world often tells us to measure life only in terms of success, productivity, and entertainment. We're told to chase endless goals, make money, build status, look good, stay busy. But at the end of the day, those pursuits leave people feeling empty. The momentary highs fade, the achievements lose their shine, and the question still remains, why am I here? What struck Joe about Islam's teaching of Allah was its clarity on that question. You're here for a reason. You are not an accident. And the reason isn't complicated, it's to recognize your Creator, to live in alignment with His guidance, and to return to Him with a heart at peace. That realization, he said, cuts through the noise of the modern age like a blade through fog. It gives you a compass when everyone else is lost. Joe highlighted something that many overlook, the discipline of prayer. To the outside world, watching Muslims bow down 5 times a day may look like a ritual, but Joe saw it differently. He saw it as a radical act of freedom. In a society that tells you to bow to money, to fame, to trends, to the endless pressure of more, more, more. Here are millions of people bowing only to Allah. They're choosing to humble themselves before the Creator rather than becoming slaves to creation. He said that was one of the most powerful messages he'd ever encountered. That real strength comes from humility. That bending your head to the ground doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're anchored. And when you're anchored in Allah, nothing else can own you. Joe explained that when you live with that awareness, the world itself looks different. You don't see money as your master, you see it as a tool. You don't see hardship as punishment, you see it as growth. You don't see death as the end, you see it as a transition. Every single experience is reframed, every single moment is charged with meaning. He drew attention to how this changes even the smallest things. Eating a meal becomes an act of gratitude because you know who provided it. Helping someone in need becomes sacred because you know it pleases your Creator. Resisting temptation becomes empowering because you're not doing it just for yourself. You're doing it for the one who sees everything. Joe argued that this is what makes the concept of Allah so transformative. It doesn't just sit in your mind, it flows into every action of your life. And then he turned to something deeper, the idea of accountability. He said one of the greatest deceptions of modern life is the illusion that you can do whatever you want without consequence. People live like kings of their own tiny kingdoms, chasing their desires, stepping on others, ignoring morality, believing they'll never be questioned. But the idea of Allah flips that completely, because if Allah is real, then every choice matters. Every word, every action, every hidden intention. They all go into a record that you'll face one day. At first, Joe admitted, this idea can feel terrifying. The thought of being held accountable for everything you do is heavy. But then, he said, it becomes liberating because it means justice is real. It means that the suffering of the innocent will not be forgotten, and the arrogance of the oppressors will not go unchecked. It means life is not chaos. It's a test with ultimate fairness waiting at the end. Joe marveled at how this changes human behavior. When you know Allah is watching, you treat people differently. You think twice before hurting someone. You become more mindful of your words, your time, your actions. And this doesn't come from fear alone. It comes from love. Because when you recognize that Allah created you, sustained you, forgave you, and gave you chance after chance, you don't want to disappoint him. You want to live in a way that reflects gratitude. He said that's why you see so many Muslims living with a balance of awe and love. They fear Allah's justice, but they also trust His mercy. They struggle with life like everyone else, but they keep returning in prayer, in repentance, in hope. And Joe believed that kind of resilience, that kind of grounded strength, is something the modern world desperately needs. But perhaps the most striking part of Joe's reflection was when he connected all of this to the reality of death. He said that, in the end, no amount of science, money, or status can stop the one thing every human will face. And when that moment comes, the illusion of control vanishes. The question isn't whether you'll die, but what happens after. Joe admitted that when he looked at the Islamic perspective that death is not the end but a doorway back to the one who created you, it made sense in a way nothing else did. Because if life has meaning, death must also have meaning. He urged people to sit with that thought, to realize that the clock is ticking, not in a depressing way, but in a clarifying way, that every breath is a chance to remember Allah. Every choice is a chance to align with Him, and every hardship is a chance to grow closer to Him. He said if people lived with that awareness, the world would look completely different. There would be more peace, more compassion, more humility, because people would realize they're not the center of the universe. They're servants of the one who made the universe. And this, Joe said, is where the true heart change begins. It's not just about finding peace for yourself. It's about stepping into a reality where everything, every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every whisper of gratitude, echoes into eternity. That's the kind of perspective that transforms not just individuals, but entire societies. Joe's words landed with power because he wasn't preaching. He was reflecting, connecting dots, wrestling with truth like any human would. And what he discovered was that belief in Allah doesn't shrink you. It expands you. It makes you part of something bigger than yourself, something eternal, something that gives every heartbeat meaning. And yet, he said, this was only scratching the surface. Because if acknowledging Allah changes how you see yourself and the world, the next realization is even more profound. How it changes the way you see love, mercy, and the ultimate hope of humanity. By the time Joe Rogan reached the final layer of his reflection on Allah, the conversation shifted from questions of existence and accountability to something even more profound: love and mercy. Because while the idea of Allah as the ultimate judge carries immense weight, what struck Joe most deeply was that Allah is also described as Amen and Ar-Rahim, the most merciful, the most compassionate. He explained that this balance is unlike anything else in the human experience. When humans hold power, it often leads to corruption, arrogance, and oppression. But with Allah, ultimate power is paired with infinite mercy. The very first words that Muslims say when they begin any prayer Bismillah are Rahman Ar-Rahim, are not about fear, but about mercy. Every chapter of the Quran, except one, begins with that reminder. Joe said that realization hit him hard because it means that Islam doesn't begin with rules or punishments, it begins with mercy. It begins with love. Joe described how powerful that is for people who feel broken, who feel they've made too many mistakes, or who think they're too far gone. In a world that often cancels you for one wrong step, Allah invites you back no matter how far you've strayed. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that Allah's mercy is greater than a mother's for her child, and Joe said that image shook him to his core. Because if there's one love in this world that we can all recognize as pure, it's the love of a mother. To imagine Allah's love being even greater than that, it's almost beyond comprehension. He emphasized that this understanding of Allah changes how you see forgiveness. Most of us struggle to forgive even small betrayals, but Allah forgives the greatest of sins if a person sincerely turns back to Him. Joe saw in this not just a doctrine, but a lifeline for humanity, because we live in a world full of regret, shame, and hidden pain. People carry wounds from their past, mistakes that haunt them, and secrets they hope no one uncovers. But the message of Allah is that no matter how heavy your past is, His mercy is heavier. No matter how deep your darkness, His light is deeper. Joe reflected on how this transforms not just individuals, but societies. A person who knows they are forgiven finds hope again. A person who knows they are loved by their Creator finds strength to stand back up. And a community built on forgiveness and compassion becomes stronger, healthier, and more united. He argued that this is what the modern world is missing. We've built systems that reward achievement but crush the broken. We've created cultures of perfection where one mistake can ruin you forever. But Allah flips that script. The broken are the ones closest to His mercy. The repentant sinner can rise higher than the arrogant saint. The door of forgiveness is never closed. Then Joe spoke about love, not just Allah's love for us, but how that love flows into how we treat each other. If Allah forgives us, how can we not forgive one another? If Allah provides for us, how can we not share with those in need? If Allah shows mercy, how can we not live with compassion? Joe said that this ripple effect is the most beautiful evidence of faith in action. It's not about empty rituals or labels. It's about becoming a vessel of the mercy you've received. And this leads to the greatest hope of all, the hope of paradise. Joe acknowledged that every human being longs for something beyond this world. Even the wealthiest, most successful people still ache with a hunger nothing on earth can satisfy. That hunger, he said, is for eternity. It's for a place where there's no pain, no loss, no death. A place where the deepest longing of the soul is finally fulfilled. And in Islam, that hope is real. It's not just wishful thinking, it's a promise from Allah. He explained how powerful it is that Islam doesn't present paradise as just a reward, but as a home. A home you were always meant for, a home you return to after the test of life. And the greatest reward of all isn't the gardens or rivers, but the nearness to Allah Himself, the one who created you, sustained you, forgave you, and loved you more than you can imagine, finally meeting him face to face. Joe said that thought alone can bring tears to your eyes because it's the completion of every search, every longing, every unanswered question. But he didn't shy away from the responsibility that comes with this hope. Paradise isn't cheap. It requires striving, discipline, humility, and above all, sincerity. Joe stressed that this is what makes faith in Allah so transformative. It's not passive. It calls you to live differently, to rise above your ego, to treat people with kindness, to resist injustice, to use your time wisely. And when you live like that, even before paradise, you taste a kind of paradise on earth, the peace of a heart connected to its creator. As Joe wrapped up his reflection, he circled back to the beginning. He said that life is short, the clock is ticking, and every one of us is walking toward the same destination. The question isn't whether we'll stand before Allah, it's whether we'll be ready when we do. And the beautiful truth, he reminded his audience, is that it's never too late. As long as you're breathing, the door is open. As long as your heart beats, mercy is within reach. Joe's powerful message about Allah wasn't just a philosophical musing. It was a call to step out of illusion, to stop carrying the weight of life alone, to recognize your Creator, and to let that recognition change your heart. Because when you know Allah, everything changes. Your fears shrink, your gratitude grows, your purpose becomes clear, and your hope shines brighter than the darkest night. And in the end, Joe left his audience with a single, unforgettable truth. Allah is greater, greater than your pain, greater than your mistakes, greater than your fears, greater than the universe itself. And once that truth settles in your heart, you'll never look at life the same way again.